Welcome to our show. This is going to be terrible. We're three friends hanging out, doing whatever seems interesting at the time. Don't say we didn't warn you. If this is your first time viewing our show, hi, my name is Robert.
Hi, I'm James.
This is Nathan.
And I'm Jack. In the spirit of Halloween, we're reviewing a particularly spooky board game, Betrayal at House on the Hill. It's a haunted house simulator in board game format, designed by Bruce Glasgow, who also did Fantasy Realms, The Cursed Horde, and Mystery, Motive for Murder, published by Avalon Hill in 2004. Since then, one expansion and 3 spin-offs based on the original game have been released, with the latest spin-off announced just this year to be a Scooby-Doo themed version titled Betrayal at Mystery Mansion. 3 to 6 players are mysteriously invited to an old house. They begin exploring, cooperatively discovering rooms, items, events, and omens until the haunt starts, which is when the traitor is revealed. The players are then generally split into 2 groups, and the game becomes a competitive endeavor where the traitor seeks to defeat the other members while they fight to survive.
I first played Betrayal at House on the Hill only a few years ago with a board game group I'd met. It was the first non-Hasbro Kitty board game I played, and because of a particular incident the first time we played, I fell in love with it immediately and got my own copy as soon as I could. And I've literally taken it with me wherever I've gone on the off chance I might be able to get to play with a group of people. I've had to do a lot of rule judging, and I'm usually able to find a decent middle ground whenever it comes to arguments with the game. But as long as people enjoy the game, I'll keep bringing it with me wherever I go because I love this game so much. James, what's your history with the game?
My introduction to the game was first trying it out with my board game group probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I played it a few times over the years and enjoyed it, but my main exposure has been playing the campaign for the Betrayal Legacy version of the game over the last year. It's similar to the original Betrayal. However, you make permanent changes to the game over the course of a 13-game campaign, and you do that by either adding cards, destroying components, writing on cards, etc., so that by the end of it, you and your playgroup have your own personalized copy of Betrayal, unique from any other. It has been interesting to revisit the original Betrayal after playing the Legacy version. How about you, Robert? Any history or background with the game?
Not really. Preparing for this review is really my first introduction to the game. Nathan has suggested that we check it out in the spirit of Halloween coming up soon. And I've played a few tabletop games in the past, like Escape Rooms in a Box, that feel similar to this. I'm not terribly interested in Halloween and horror-themed activities and things of the like, but this game has enough of balance in that realm to pique my interest. And boy, was I not prepared for how much fun this game turned out to be.
For our review, we're going to break our review down into 5 sections. We're going to judge its game mechanics, how long it can take to play the game, replayability, generally what we thought the worst thing about playing it was, and was there anything good, which for me, there's plenty good with the game. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Robert. What were your thoughts on the game mechanics of it?
I actually have a lot to say here with the game mechanics. Up front, the game is fairly easy to follow. It's not terribly complicated, but there is a lot going on here. The rules do a decent enough job to get you through the basics of the game. But like most board games of this size, you're going to need a slow first playthrough with some close, patient friends so that you can kind of work through learning the game together. That is still very much necessary, even in a title like this. But once you get the hang of it, it moves pretty smoothly. There are some issues where the rules are not always clear. I found this usually happens when players have different interpretations of some of the text on the cards. However, when you break it down logically, I think it clears up most of the issues. It won't always work out that way, though. Not everybody thinks the same way, and certainly some interpretations will benefit one player or team over another. This is where having a good GM who can fairly judge the spirit of the card and the spirit of the rules of the game and remain unbiased is super important. There were a few instances where players almost came to blows over some discrepancies in the interpretation of a card rule, but as long as the GM provided a sound argument for their decision and everyone respected it, we quickly moved on and never looked back.
So yeah, I can either stay there with it or force it to come our way. come back out to the foyer? I don't know.
I don't think you guys should be forcing it to split the heads. You should keep them corralled together.
Nathan.
Okay. Fair.
Every time it moves,
I cannot answer that question.
Well, it seems like every time it moves a room, we get a new one.
Yeah, another body piece.
Like it's like the three-headed, in Hercules, three-headed dragon.
Yeah, that's not good
Yeah.
news.
All right, so then should I just stay here?
Nathan is dead and cannot help you.
My
I gotta
apologies.
remind you
know.
of that. Like, you can only ask him about things about the rules. When it comes to strategy, he's dead, so you can't talk to him.
Okay, that
This
makes
isn't
sense.
a seance.
Is it in the rules that Nathan can't talk to us about strategy?
Yes.
He's dead. Like, in the rules or not,
This
that would
is what
make
I'm
zero
asking.
sense.
This is what I'm asking if it's in the rules, because I'm trying to find where it is, because
It is in the
I know
rules.
that's... I see the thing about explorers can die. Yeah, otherwise my turn is dead. I'm just trying to look for the thing about death.
I'm not seeing any official ruling. Some of the forums basically say to defer to house rules on what dead players can and cannot do, if they are just spectating or if they are allowed to also continue to talk and advise other players on what they should do.
Here's the we'll keep Robert's idea in that I'm dead and I can't talk strategy. I can only do rule clarifications. But Wayne does have a crystal ball, so if he succeeds in a crystal ball trait roll, then could he ask my spirit a question directly?
The only ability it gives you is to search the item or event stack, so that would be a no. I get what you're getting at for the joke of, talking to the dead, but...
Well, it's 5 or 4 against 1, so...
Also, Robert, if you're trying to use the logic of the card doesn't do that, then the rules don't say he can't talk. So...
I mean, logically speaking, dead people cannot speak.
We're in a house full of ghosts.
Are we? We're in a house.
Are we? You're in a house with a two-headed Ouroboros. I haven't seen any ghosts.
Nothing here makes sense.
So
The
I'm just
walls
saying,
came to
considering
life
it's either,
and sucked somebody in.
It's either Nathan actually has not lost yet. He may be dead, but he could still be on the winning side. So I don't see why it doesn't make sense for him to continue talking and strategizing if he wants.
Nathan is the GM. I will defer to Nathan.
I'm just not going to talk strategy anymore because I think that's most realistic and most fair.
I will respect either way. It's just logically to me, if the player is dead, I don't understand why they would be able to strategize with the rest of the team.
Because he can still win.
He could still win because he's a member of the team, but he's dead, so he cannot do anything. For him to be able to speak and strategize would mean he could also move things on the board and influence the gameplay. He can't do that if he's dead. And offering advice would be influencing the gameplay.
Yeah, because I'm dead, I can't make my player token even bigger on the board. So
shut up. I saw that.
I didn't see where to go.
If you
Holy
look
crap.
over my side, it's huge.
It's a
So
trophy.
I'm just gonna go do that.
Hey, now, it's not about the size of the
Yeah.
player
I missed
token.
it.
It's about how you use it.
Holy hell!
You keep... Oh, it's gone. There it is.
So,
What the
in the
hell?
interest of moving things along,
Oh, okay.
Nathan, your official ruling, please. And I
Official
don't
ruling.
care either way.
my official ruling is I will not talk strategy. I'll just answer questions about the game mechanics. But I'm going to say that if they're able to pass the knowledge check on the crystal ball, then I'll answer a question directly about what I think their strategy should be.
Okay.
I like the role play aspect.
Right?
In the game, you move from room to room, and it offers a nice balance between the excitement of possibly discovering something great, but then the absolute fear of walking into danger. Not every single room you encounter is going to be good for you. The game grows as you play, and I find that to be the most fun because you can't really strategize up front. Everybody's kind of walking in blind, and you need to think on your feet and bide your time until the truly scary stuff begins, which brings me to the haunts. Not all haunts are created equal, but for the most part, they are very well themed and offer enough to make each experience different from the last. Splitting up a party from survivors into traitors versus traitor is a great mechanic. That's not every single haunt, but for the majority of them, that typically is how it plays out. And that's a lot of fun, pitting friends against each other, especially when it can be a different person or a random person each time you play. Not only is that great, but then it's forcing the strategy to change mid-game. Like we talked about, you can't really spend too much time planning it out. But the moment that the haunt starts, now the strategy begins, and where you thought you were going to be allied with a certain person, now that person is against you, changing up how you were approaching the game, because up until then you were kind of working cooperatively. So with clear objectives, each team works towards their goal, but this is where some of my frustrations in the mechanics start to come in. The game has one set of objective of rules for the survivors and another set of objectives and rules for the traitor. And you're not permitted, or at least you shouldn't share any of the information about those rules or objectives with the opposing party. And this can be frustrating when some of the things require you to trust the other team, to be forthcoming about some of the details you need to know to ensure they're not cheating or misinterpreting. But they don't have to, and they're actually instructed not to. To give you an example, during one of our playthroughs, I was a traitor, and the players had to complete a specific task before they could even attack me to cause any sort of damage or to kill my monster. However, I don't know any of those details. How am I supposed to know if they actually completed it? I have to trust that they completed it. And in a game where, you know, it's all about deception and we're in this horror element and it's, you know, traitors versus survivors, there isn't really an incentive for them to be honest with me. But I guess if you're playing with friends, hopefully you've got some code of honor and they are being honest with you. But I just felt like there should be some form there to be able to share those kinds of details where it doesn't give away their strategy, but at least lets me know that they're being truthful about their what they're doing. We did play this on Tabletop Simulator remotely. You know, we are kind of living in the darkest timeline, so it's not safe to necessarily play in person anymore. You know, before I wouldn't come within 20 feet of Nathan. Now you can't even get me to come within 20 miles. So we did play this virtually over Tabletop Simulator. And so there is some difficulty there where if we were playing in person, you could cover up the important bits of the rules and strategies for each team and just let people see the information that they needed to know so that you knew that they were being honest or that they actually did complete whatever they were trying to complete. So I can give them a pass because of that. Other than that, I had no issues with the game mechanics. I found them to be quite robust and well thought out.
Yeah, I basically agree with Robert. He covered a lot there. I know he just had like a wall of text he read to all of us. But basically, the mechanics are sound. It's just that the communication of special instances can leave some discrepancies. So like one instance, James had lost a speed point in the middle of his turn. And then so he moved a tile, lost the speed, and then technically could not have moved out of that tile. But so it's like, do you start the turn with the max amount of moves, and if anything happens to your speed in turn, does that change or anything like that? And the rules don't cover that at all. So we had to kind of make a decision on the move there on the fly. And using his more recent ruling with Betrayal Legacy, we came to a fair judgment on that. So it's kind of funny how with this game, especially just the second edition that we were using and none of the spin-offs that have more current rules and updated processings and that kind of stuff, we just kind of had to like make a rule and then keep going with it and just hope that it works out for the best in the long run. James?
The gameplay is simple and easy enough for most players to pick up, even if they're not regularly into board games. The problem, unfortunately, comes from some of the haunts. Yes, the fact that there are so many is great for replayability. The base game alone has 50 haunts. That will take you forever to play. However, it seems like some of them were maybe not as play-tested as others. They will have the theme pitch perfect for the haunt, but the mechanics for it will either be slightly broken or not communicated well enough in the rules. Part of that could be solved in an eventual third edition of the game, which prior to the recording, we talked about technically you could argue is the Betrayal Legacy version. The way this goes is first edition of the game came out in 2004. Then we had the second edition in 2010. And then the Legacy version, which I'm sure I'll talk about again, came out in 2018. So that roughly works about timeline-wise. And the Legacy version is the one I have the most experience with, so it seems to be the most polished. So I'm sure I'll probably talk about that later.
So with the base game coming with 50 haunts, you'd think that the games probably run really quickly. They don't. the game says that it can last 30 minutes to 2 hours for one game to pass. I have never, in my years of playing this game, have a haunt last only 30 minutes. It has always been, at the very least, an hour and a half, usually going 3 to 4 hours, which I don't necessarily have a problem with because I kind of have like a really good kind of endurance with stuff like that. But I kind of feel like they were more like trying to make it available to a wider audience and not exclude people, which kind of seems deceptive. But I mean, in theory, you could play around in 30 minutes if the haunt starts immediately and it's a very simple one. I kind of hate how that's not really representative of my actual history with the game. Also, setup time is listed as less than 5 minutes, but if you just bought this game, no, there are so many little like cardboard things you got to punch out and then set aside, and there's like triangular tokens and square tokens and pentagonal tokens, and you just got to keep them all sorted and organized. So it's not 5 minutes, and cleanup is even worse, especially if you want to cut down on setup time for the next game and keep things organized. Just don't listen to the time things on this game at all. James?
So to be fair, you're mostly comparing the setup for the very first game, where again, you have to punch out all the little cardboard chits and things. That's fine. That's going to take a lot longer than 5 minutes. In my experience with Betrayal Legacy, I don't know on the box what it said as far as setup, but it didn't quite take 5 minutes either. I'd say probably closer to 10, maybe 15 if there was a lot for a particular haunt. But in general, duration for Betrayal at House on the Hill can vary wildly. As with all games, the first few playthroughs with a new group take time because you're trying to learn the rules, especially for a game with as many variables as Betrayal. Even when a play group is fully accustomed to Betrayal's rules, there will still be many instances of some haunts taking considerably longer than others, either because the haunt wasn't fully playtested by the developers or the players didn't fully understand the directions for the haunt. In those cases, the game would tend to drag, which really brings down the mood for the whole crowd. Robert?
I'm going to agree with Nathan and James here wholeheartedly. We didn't have too many playthroughs together before our review, at least for me anyway, but I think I can still say that this category is a mixed bag. It really depends on your playstyle and your interests. Our first game with 4 players lasted about 3 hours. You can cut out some of the time it spent learning some of the portions and breaks that we took in between, but it's still about 2 hours of actual focused playtime. Now that's pretty good for my liking. 2 hours is right around the amount of time that I could stomach sitting around at a table playing this kind of game. My days of being up till 3 a.m. playing a 12-hour long game are past me. I got kids. I need sleep, man. I haven't slept since my first daughter was born in 2016, and ain't nobody getting sleep in 2020. Our second game lasted a little bit shorter, but the problem is the haunt started so early that the game was really over within 30 minutes. It was clear from the outset that the timing of the starting of the haunt and the haunt that was chosen, there was a clear winner, and we were really just powering through the remaining hour and a half just to get in the experience. But we really just got into the end proving what we knew all along. So your mileage may vary here, how long the game will last, but 2 to 3 hours seems to be kind of the sweet spot. Hopefully the haunt doesn't start too early and it doesn't make the amount of time feel wasted. Our second playthrough certainly felt that way to me, and I was the one who won.
So yeah, as has been mentioned before, the haunts do differ quite greatly on the rulings, the outcomes. What are you trying to complete with it? Who are you trying to kill? Are you trying to kill anybody? Or are you just trying to convert them? So there's a whole slew of different scenarios that we can go through. 50 haunts in the original game, 50 haunts were added in the expansion, and one of them that was added in the expansion, you can't even play until you've played like 6 other haunts to begin with. Like if you actually get that haunt when it's revealed, it will say, do not play this until you've done these other ones. And so the replayability of this game is fantastic because there are so many different scenarios. And even if there was only a handful of scenarios, the fact that the rooms are drawn randomly when you're generating the house just means that it's even more variable whenever you're playing through, because you're not going to walk into the same room every time you play this game. It's always going to be different. And I love the fact that you can sit down and play this game every week and then have a different experience every week.
Like Nathan said, there is a lot of replayability here. Even if you don't happen to be a fan of the particular haunt that you're currently playing, there are so many different and varied haunts that there's a decent chance you'll find one that you do like on your next playthrough. If you enjoyed the theming of the game, you will definitely get your money's worth with Betrayal at House on the Hill. Robert?
I'm not going to beat an undead horse here. It's definitely got it in the replayability category. 100 haunts, every time you play the game is different. There's certainly incentive to play the game again and again to see what happens next. So this is probably my favorite thing about the game.
All in all, there are troubles with the rulings, of course, but to me, those can be fixed, so it's not really an issue with the game. The problem I have with the game, the worst thing about this game, is it's such a daunting endeavor when you first see it, because you have to learn all these little kind of rules that play in different scenarios with certain things going on. And then you see the game master, the game owner pulling out all these different cards and tokens, and you're just kind of like, what have I gotten myself into? So it's, for me, the worst thing about this game is just getting people to play it because they think that they have to be a glutton for punishment like me or something like that. And that's not the case. It's just, there are so many variables, there's so many instances of different things happening, and it's just, it looks overwhelming, and that is just not the case. James?
The worst thing to me about the game, it can be very one-sided. Once the haunt starts, you'll typically be separated into your traitor team and your hero team. Depending on the haunt and when it's triggered, one side might be woefully unprepared for what the game wants them to accomplish, as was the case with one of the haunts we played for this review. In an instance like that, you have a clear winner sooner than expected, but just kind of feel like you're ending up going through the motions in order to finish the game. In our instance, we probably could have finished a half hour earlier because we had the clear winner, but hey, whatever. Even the winner in a game like this would admit that it would be a hollow victory and leads to a poor gameplay experience.
Yeah, I won that game, so I agree. For me, the worst thing kind of plays into what Nathan was saying earlier about getting people to want to play this game. Things can feel a bit crowded. The game has many pieces to it. The player figures, player tokens, item tokens, monster tokens, 8 dice per player. The physical game has a total of 8, but that's irrelevant. Player cards or stat trackers, room cards, item, omen, event cards. You get my point, right? There's just so much, and you're playing with 6 people, so you can imagine the amount of pieces you have to keep track of on the board can get a little complex and a little overwhelming. So, but while I don't care for it, I can respect it. There is a lot going on. Every piece does play a role, and the role doesn't ever feel completely useless. It just gets a little too busy for me sometimes, like with the rule interpretations. Having a good GM that understands the game well and helps manage all of these pieces makes it less tedious. So while I classified this as a dislike, it's really more of a manageable annoyance.
So all in all, is this game good? And I'm going to wholeheartedly say, yes, this game is fantastic. I loved it the first time I played it because what happened was the traitor gets revealed. He's on the top floor of this haunted house. He does this magical maneuver where he uses a magic slide to get down to the bottom of the house where this annoying player was sitting and refused to work with the rest of the heroes. He was trying to be a rogue and do his own thing. And he lands in the same room as this guy and does such a wonderful dice roll. Basically, he just punches him and kills this guy in one hit. And it's like, oh, this traitor guy is very powerful. And man, I wish we were working together to actually, fight against him instead of bickering at each other. So it was just such an amazing, wonderful experience first time I played this. And then the worst part, besides the rule nitpicking, was we had one game where we had a bunch of zombies we were fighting, and the poor guy, he opens the music box, which when the music box is opened, any creature within the room is enthralled by the music and has to pass a save every turn. Otherwise, they are continuously enthralled with the music. So everybody who passed through the room kept failing that save. So we had all 4 players in this room, all 12 zombies in this room, and they're all just enthralled by this music box for like 6 turns, and we're all just sitting there sweating like, oh God, who's going to break first? Who's going to be able to break free and get out of this freaking room? So when things line up perfectly, this game is wonderful. But getting to that point can be kind of sluggish. James?
So even if certain haunts could have been playtested more, there's still a lot to love about this game. From the way it simulates exploring a haunted house to just the sheer number of different horror stories it references through its many haunts. If you are a fan of horror, you'll love this game. I highly recommend it. Robert?
As I said, replayability is right at the top. And I like that the game isn't entirely the same every time. It's got plenty of variety, and the game stays new and interesting. However, completing all 100 haunts, if you have the expansion, does feel like a chore. I couldn't see myself playing this every weekend. And even if I did, that means it would take almost 2 years to experience them all. 4 years if you experience one as each time as a survivor and then again as the traitor. That's a long time to dedicate to a single board game. Maybe that's your thing, but I think this game makes it worth it.
It's a great game so long as you're prepared for a long game, have a really solid understanding of the rules and the spirit they're trying to convey, and are willing to make concessions to keep the game from stalling and stagnating.
Betrayal at House on the Hill is a great board game for both experienced and new players alike. If I'm being honest though, and I'll admit I am biased, I would recommend giving the Betrayal Legacy version of the game a shot instead. Legacy released in 2018, as opposed to the second edition of regular Betrayal releasing in 2010. So to me, Legacy is currently the most polished version of the game when it comes to rules. Plus again, once you finish your campaign, you'll have your very own custom version of Betrayal that you can play again and again after the campaign to call your own. No matter what though, the game in general gets a big thumbs up from me.
The game is nowhere near terrible. This game is great. I'm not into the horror and Halloween haunt scene like I mentioned in the beginning, but those elements are tame enough here that it feels like you're watching a Halloween special on cable TV. It's not too gruesome, but also not too light. No game is perfect. It has its issues like most games do, but those are easily worked out with an understanding group and a good level-headed GM. Get yourself in with your best friends, prepare for hours of fun every time you play. I'm looking forward to future playthroughs, actually, even if we'll probably die and start our own haunt before we ever get around to completing them all.
So let's go ahead and just quickly cover Terrible Times. This is unrelated to what we just talked about. It's the new section we're trying out, where we're just going to kind of review what we've been doing for the past week or two since our last episode. Anything we want to share, whether it's newsworthy that's happened in our lives or just things we've been checking out. I mentioned either last episode or the episode before that about I had been watching a lot of YouTube videos about the game Among Us, available on mobile and PC platforms. I finally got to play with some friends. I'd kind of just been doing like the whole free play, which is just you doing a bunch of tasks. And it was fun. I had fun playing with the people that that I was friends with, but we were in a public lobby and there's a bunch of random people joining in. So we weren't all in the same Discord server. So we're just trying to type our messages to everybody. And of course, everybody's impatient. Where body? And you're trying to type, I found it in the electrical room. So if you're going to play Among Us, I highly recommend that you have some kind of video chatting service with it because it makes the game that much smoother. But all in all, it's fun. Give it a shot or at least watch some videos about Among Us because it is fantastic when you're playing with the right people. James?
For my terrible times, I just finished up watching season 2 of Harley Quinn on HBO Max. I really enjoyed it once it got going. It deals with the character Harley Quinn, who most people just see as the sidekick to Joker, Batman's main nemesis. But this series kind of really continues what they've been doing in the comics of bringing her into her own. And I highly recommend it. Like I said, it's on HBO Max, or for the next month or two, depending on when you're watching this, you can probably catch it on the DC Universe app, but that is going to go away, I believe, at the end of November or January. So a lot of that content is going to be shuffled over to HBO Max, unfortunately. From what I heard, DC Universe was great. But anyway, Harley Quinn, highly recommend it. It's got 2 seasons right now, 13 episodes apiece, so it's a breezy 26 half-hour episodes. It ends where it could have finished, but it just get renewed for a 3rd season, so hey, they're going to keep it going. I don't know. I'll probably keep watching. Robert?
I'll have to check out Harley Quinn. It's been a busy couple weeks in between episodes for me, so I haven't picked up or experienced anything new. Last time I recommended watching The Boys on Amazon. I still recommend that. They're on episode 6 now of the 8 this season, so it's getting close to the end, and it's been just as great as season 1, so I still highly recommend that. In a twist ending, we actually planned ahead this time, and we now know what our next episode will be. We will be reviewing The Mandalorian Season 1, as Season 2 is scheduled to release on October 30th. I am super excited to revisit Season 1 and share our thoughts. Plus, it's Star Wars. Who doesn't love Star Wars? So that concludes our time for today. I want to wish everybody a safe and happy Halloween. For one day out of the 1,000 this year, you'll be able to wear a mask and actually enjoy it.
Goodbye.
Be good to each other out there.
Have a happy Halloween, everybody out there. Now it's time for some candy. Om nom 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 nom.